This podcast is brought to you by the Albany Public Library main branch and the generosity of listeners like you. What is a podcast? God, Daddy, these people talk as much as you do. Razib Khan's Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for listening to the ungated version of the Unsupervised Learning podcast. If you want to read some essays on some of these topics, please check out razib.substack.com. Again, that's razib.substack.com. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unsupervised Learning podcast. And I'm here today with my friend Alexander Cortes, who is someone that I know from the internet, as I know many people, although recently he moved to the environs of Austin, Texas. So we have been spending a little time IRL, so to speak, as they say. I know Alexander, I think better than some, I guess. So I probably will show through. But I'm here to talk basically. The first thing we're going to talk about is broscience. If you guys haven't seen Alex on Twitter, he's a big presence. One of the, probably, I don't know, I would say he is the first broscience person that I really followed closely. Partly it's because he's prolific and he's very scientifically informed, logical and analytical. And also, I have to say, a lot of the bro-fluencers, they will post a lot of pictures of them eating raw meat and stuff, and it's entertaining, but I don't really know what I can take from that. So Alex doesn't do that. It's AJA_Cortes with an S if you guys want to follow him. So obviously, I've alluded to this whole bro science world that you are a part of, that you are, a major influencer, I would say. And I think I read you talking about this on the internet, on Twitter, well before the pandemic. And, it was basically, I see it as adjacent to quantified self, which is, somewhat different sociological profile, I think, of the people that do that sort of thing. Broscience seems to be more adjacent to, hardcore fitness, bodybuilder type guys, somewhat different demographic, but, kind of using the same methods, the same philosophy. Could you just talk about the community and the general outlook and what you've seen, maybe over the last 10 years as it's evolved?
Oh, yeah. So thank you for the intro, Razib. So broscience, if you go back 20 years, 15 years, it was a derogatory term. It was given to bros on the internet, like in the early days of the internet, who would espouse pseudoscientific opinions on usually training, dieting practices. Like, this is very bodybuilding specific, but it wasn't necessarily things that were validated by formal research. And some of it was silly, like it was bad ideas, but a lot of it was good. And I took over the term because I realized when I got into personal training over almost 20 years ago now, that there's this whole body of work, body of knowledge that goes back over a century, arguably even longer than that, around physical training, exercise, and health. But it wasn't really until the mid-1950s, 1960s that any of it was formally scientifically validated. So bro science, I honestly think of it as what probably science originally was 2,000 years ago, genuinely days of Aristotle, where you're just observing reality, you're looking for cause and effect and trying to identify mechanisms, and it's very outcome driven. It's not abstract from real world, it's not in the lab, it's just in day-to-day life. And if you go to the gym or you're trying to be healthier and you are trying to attune yourself to your body's own feedback, you are in essence doing what I call bro science. You're just paying attention to your own bodily signals. You're trying to make something happen, whether that's more muscle, less body fat, higher state of health. And this is all done without needing, again, formal scientific guidelines. People have been healthy for many thousands of years before we ever had exercise science. Now, this is obviously more of a nuanced definition. You can also just be what I call bro-tarded with it and post photos of you eating raw meat, which is more entertainment. I don't think there's anything useful about that. But, going back a decade, when I first got on, it was called Twitter then, there were no fitness personalities on Twitter at all. I think I genuinely was like the first one to use the platform. This was like 2015, literally. And I would just post, and this is when you could post 100 times a day. It's 140 characters. And then over time, I developed a following. And yeah, it kind of took off probably around like 2020 in particular, but enabled me to meet a lot of people. And then broscience now is sort of having its day, where you have guys like the Huberman podcast, for example, where there's all these health practices that have arisen organically over so many decades. And there's finally research around them that supports them, stuff like circadian health, things like nutrient timing, even like the science of hypertrophy or strength training. There's so many practices that go back decades where now, after 30, 40 years of formal study and various meta-analysis, we can say like, oh yes, this does in fact work. Even we knew that it worked 50 years ago, but we can say with certainty, yes, it works today because we did the research on it. So broscience is sort of in the limelight for, I think, for the better.
I mean, so I think, you're kind of alluding to Huberman, who's a big influencer now, just big podcaster. So there's a whole community out there. And I guess, the question that I have, obviously in health and wellness, there's nutritionists with PhDs or master's degrees and whatever, credentialing, this whole institutional pathway. How do you recommend someone who gets interested? So I know you. Also, you have a long track record, and so when I ask you something, like, yeah, I'm just gonna say it, like, you're not gonna be retarded about it. Um, you know, there are a lot of people out there though who are jacked, and people are like, "Oh, I want to be like that," and then they just, you read what they say, and I'm like, I don't even know what this. Like, so, okay, I guess what I would explain to the listener here is when you say something, I can usually understand actually what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not like some mystical thing, right? But there's a whole community of fitness influencers. I don't know. They're almost like, it's almost like health astrology. It's hard to explain, but they have like an oracular way of pronouncing things. You know what I'm saying? And so like, how do you guide people in this world? Because a lot of people do want to kind of reclaim their health and their wellness, and just relying on society or institutions or medicine. I mean, it's not like you see your doctor every day. A lot of people see their doctor once a year. And the society itself has a lot of unhealthy habits. So you kind of have to take your own destiny into your own hands. And, obviously there's YouTube, there's podcasting, there's X, Twitter, social media, there's, private message groups, chat groups, like, you're part of a lot of these, so how do you guide people?
That's a good point. So like if you are, this is a good sort of like a sociological kind of inquiry, for people who, let's say like myself, where I would say I grew up in bro fitness world, meaning I was one of those guys as a teenager. I bought muscle magazines when I was like 14, 15. I went to the gym. I would talk to like the oldest, biggest guys I could find. And then you realize there's this whole subculture of like hardcore trainees where like that's what they build their life around. And that culture, every culture, every subculture has its own linguistics, right? Like they have their own language that they speak. And to an outsider, like nobody knows what you're talking about. But if you're within the culture, like you know exactly what's being said. And that, what I call like the hardcore bro community, they are the ones that I would say lead a lot of the legitimately cutting edge human performance research that exists today, whether it's experiments with anabolics, whether it's experiments with other compounds, whether it's experiments with training methods or nutrition. A lot of what's been done in bro world goes back decades, and they pioneered performance enhancement, or let's just say quality of even life enhancement. That said, there's a big gap between bro world and average Joe world. When I got started with training, my clientele, both 16 years ago today, has been regular people. And so what I was always very good at was I would sort of take both the science and evidence and sort of like the bro perspective, and I would translate it into just normal everyday language that makes sense to a typical person. Using just like common language. Yeah, I try to avoid using bro terminology. I've always tried to avoid, I'll reference sort of like older practices, but I always want to contextualize it to like the average Joe, average Jane, someone who's a newcomer to fitness and with health, and they're just trying to make sense of things. Now it's called taking a first principle approach, but that's how I always approached it. Like, let's distill this down to basics. what does it actually mean to be healthy? Like, what are we even trying to achieve when we say that? And then what are good productive things we can do in the gym or with nutrition or with our schedule, so on and so forth, that will help us achieve that. So,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's it too. The other factor to that is when I say I'm outcome driven, I care about producing results. But like many fields, a lot of bro stuff gets sort of like lost in like the weeds of theory or in mechanism, things that may or may not be happening. I don't care about any of that. Like I stay away. I've seen these arguments play out in fitness world for 20 years that are, I consider, hugely unproductive. People arguing about internal moment arms and external moment arms and length tension relationships and overloaded partials and all this stuff that if you talk to an average person about this, they're just like, what the hell are you saying? Like, what does any of that mean? Right? It's like, what does it mean? We don't even know. I've always avoided that. I'm like, look, the average person just wants to look good naked and be a healthy body weight, not be overweight, probably drop some fat. How can I help you get there? And then what can I teach you that will give you the tools to do that where you feel confident? So that's how I will communicate and that's how I will write. And that's always been my MO my entire career.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, the whole field of trainers, it's a little bit like yoga teachers. There's just like a lot of people who call themselves trainers and people call themselves yoga teachers. And the really good ones obviously can make a really good living, but there's a lot of people who are quite marginal. Can you tell me, like, what do you think really sets apart a good trainer from a mediocre trainer? And I think most of the people out there have had trainers of various levels of, competence and utility. So, I think people will be curious what you think about this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So personal training is both an art and a science. There's the psychology personality part of it, which is more what I would call the artistry of just being able to work well with people. And there's a science of it where that's the science of fat loss, science of hypertrophy, muscle building, science of strength training. And then you have to merge those two things. Statistically speaking, around 90% of people that become personal trainers quit after 6 months. Very, very few people, I think it's less than 10%, ever actually practice beyond the 5-year mark. So as a heuristic, it's like, how do you know if you're working with a good trainer? How long have they been doing it? If they've been doing it 5, 10 plus years, they're probably good, probably. The other thing that I always tell people, if you're looking to hire somebody, is like, just find out how experienced they are. Credential doesn't really matter. There's a gazillion credentials, none of which have much real weight. But experience. And then number 2, ask them what their actual training philosophy is for delivering results. Like, just as a very straightforward question, like, what's your overall philosophy to how you get people better? And they should be able to provide you some kind of answer. If they don't have any kind of philosophy at all, if you're just dumbfounded by the question, don't work with that person. Working with the human body requires like an applied philosophy of biology. Since unlike a scientist or unlike someone that works in academia, you actually have to deliver on like what the mechanism does. So like you're a practitioner, like you're in the real world. If someone's going to hire you, they're hiring you again for an outcome. I want you to get me from A to B to C. That's what I want. I'm not hiring you to study something that may or may not work. Like, I want you to help me lose 50 pounds of body fat. Can you do it for me? So you have to be pretty concrete with what you're going to do with that person. There's going to be flexibility. There's going to be adjustment. But you have to have some kind of plan, some kind of approach to make that happen. So, those are the two things. Just how long they've been practicing, what's their philosophy to training and nutrition. And, if they satisfy both those requirements, they're probably going to be pretty good. And then, third thing would be like, do they have track record? Like myself, I say this, this is not to brag, but it's bragging. I've had 60,000 people use my programs over the course of my career. Like, I have a huge data bank, more than most professionals in this field ever will. I'm very confident in that what I do works. That's a lot of people, obviously. Even though I was a in-person trainer for 7 years, I trained on average 8 to 10 appointments a day for 7 years straight. Like, I've worked with a lot of people in person. I've worked with a lot of people online. So like, I have, probably more than most, have extreme degree of confidence in that my methodologies will produce. But if you can find a very experienced person like that, where they work with lots of people, they have testimonials, they have a philosophy, you'll probably have a good time with them. In contrast, if you hire a newbie trainer that's been training less than 5 years and they've working a part-time schedule, like it's their side hustle job, something else, probably going to be a waste of money.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, so obviously, um, I mean, we'll talk about peptides later, and the new science is like transforming a lot of things when it comes to health. But you've been in this game for a while. Initially as a participant, now you're a professional. We in this country are going through, basically a public health crisis, a health crisis in general with obesity. Um, you know, I mean, and it's very, very stratified. Like where I live in the central Austin, I don't see that many obese people. But if I go north to Georgetown, and those of you who live in and around Texas will know what I'm talking about here, all of a sudden you start to see the normal range of Americans where like 40% of people are obese. And so obviously there's a lot of potential customers out there for you. On the other hand, um, until recently, the direction when it comes to something like obesity, just every year more and more people get obese at younger and younger ages. You as a professional in the field, like trying to make people fit, what is your attitude towards, like, I think the term is obesogenic environments? Like, how do you deal with it? How do you psychologically kind of just get a grip and cope with it?
Good question. Like, you have to acknowledge that, I think first before anything else that I said this even if you go back 5 years, like before I was Impact really hit mainstream, I said openly, like, obesity won. The modern environment that we live in is obesogenic. What does that mean? It means that it is, not necessarily intentionally, but it has been engineered to create a default state where consumption and gluttony and overeating are the norm. Like, they're just easy habits to fall into. And unless you have really good, really parental role models that from a young age model healthy behaviors and, push you into athletics and where those things become just sort of like default states for you. If you don't have that, you're going to end up overweight, obese. The fallacy around human willpower and that you can give people more willpower and make them more inclined to willpower and truly motivate them, that has never played out. Neither in like social science formally or even like in fitness world. We have more personal trainers, fitness people than ever at any point in history. It didn't change the needle on obesity. What changes the needle, what really changes things is just the environment in which you live. If you live in a active place, typically let's say a big city, a tier 1, tier 2 city, you're in Los Angeles, you're in New York, you're in Chicago, Colorado, Miami, you can just name off America's big cities. And you are a young professional and you're working in an environment where appearances count. And there's like a culture of working out, exercise, Pilates, running clubs, going to the gym, Equinox, all these things. You're probably more inclined to be fit. Now, but as soon as you go into the, not the outskirts, but you go into the suburbs or you go into rural America, and you go into those social spheres. Yeah, most people are overweight. The default state is for people to be overweight. And ironically enough, that plays out in most countries across the world. If you go to big cities, almost anywhere, you could go to you could go to Thailand and you go to like a big city. It's like, oh, you'll see fitter people. You go out to the villages, people will be a little less fit. Not American level obesity, but just a little bit less fit. People in cities are always fitter. So you need to pick your environments accordingly. Like, where are you actually going to live? One, and then two, like, what is your community? If you come from a background where you're Hispanic and your whole family is fat Mexicans, like parts of my family, and there are no fit, skinny people, you're going to have an uphill battle. It's going to have to be very conscientious. You're going to have to really engineer very intentionally your home, your habits. You're going to need to make a break with your familial ties that way. Not never seeing those people again, but there's going to be a clash of behavior changes. Yeah, that's a common thing for people when they try to lose weight for the first time, and they start getting sabotaging behaviors from close friends and family especially. That happens all the time. So it's challenging. Like, and I'm more sympathetic now at this stage of my career than I was when I started when I was 20. But when I was 20, I was stupid. You think that when you're 20 years old in your 20s, you think everyone can just overcome things with willpower and force, and like, what's the problem? Why is this so hard? Like every single person with no responsibilities. Then you get older, and hopefully you get a little bit wiser, and you realize, like, wow, this is actually extremely challenging, and nobody has good answers as to how to change human nature. No religion on earth has solved for that. I said this.
Yeah.
I said this the other day. I forget the particular form. I'm like, a lot of personal trainers, fitness people, health influencers, like sort of self-styled gurus, they like to think that they have the answers to this kind of problem. And Jesus Christ didn't have the answers to making people behave better. Like every religion is, perhaps perfect in its theology, but imperfect in its implementation, right? Like, why can't people just do the things that they're supposed to do? So, for something like obesity, it's like, I like I said 5 years ago, I didn't know what was going to happen in regards to trying to change the course of society overnight. I didn't see a possibility for it.
Obviously, one thing I want to talk about, because one of the things that you've been involved in is this peptide world, which like the most common peptide that's like in the kind of zeitgeist is the GLP peptides. And you have what is it? You have the Elite Research USA. So I think that's one of your projects, one of your companies, and you have the peptide guides that you often sell. You see them on Twitter, and you have a lot of group chats, and you've given some insights to people I know in group chats. But like, I still think most Americans don't know what peptides are. They don't know how it's going to transform society, maybe. Obviously GLPs are a big deal, like they're reversing obesity, but it's only in the last year or two, and the vast majority of the population still hasn't gotten on. I mean, there's a lot of obese people that aren't on GLPs, and I don't really understand why, but that's fine, right? So I think this is an issue. This is a phenomenon that people should know about, because it's going to probably impact them in the next 5 years, next 5 to 10 years for sure. So you are someone who's been very heavily involved with this, going back to the broscience stuff,
Yes.
So can you tell us what peptides are, and can you tell us about GLPs and other things besides GLPs, which I know, you're involved in, talking about a lot of the other types of peptides out there?
Oh yeah, for sure. So peptides, let's start with basics. Like, let's just sort of explain it like from first principles, right? As simple as possible. So if you go back to the early 1900s, there's a German chemist. His name was Emil Fischer. He won a Nobel Prize. I forget what year specifically, 1901, 2, or 3. Pick one of those years. But he won the Nobel Prize for sort of explaining the chemistry of sugars and purines. And then he started doing research into amino acids and like, how do amino acids work? And I think this is the very early stages of organic chemistry, right? Like, they're looking at things under a microscope. We don't have super high powered microscopes. It's just guys sort of looking at stuff and realizing like, okay, this part can be broken into smaller parts. But Fischer was the one where he realized that you had proteins that he could look at in a microscope, and there were smaller pieces that would make up the protein. And those pieces, like these, which are amino acids, he called those peptos, which comes from like a Greek term. I think means like digested. So those proteins are peptos, these smaller pieces, and then that turned into peptides. And then so many sort of years later, you get fast forward in time a bit, we get to the understanding that these peptides form bonds with each other. They form peptide bonds, which is a type of covalent bond. If you link enough of them together, that makes like an amino acid, that makes potentially a protein. And peptides are just what's called small molecules. They're not quite the size of proteins. They're just a bunch of amino acids linked together. I'm not going to name all the amino acids, but there's about 20 amino acids in the body. You can think of them sort of like letters. And the amino acids themselves are made of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen. One of them is sulfur, cysteine. But these are basic building block elements of life, right? This is kind of like, I think, middle school chemistry. So, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, you put the stuff together.
Yeah. I mean, anyone out there that's like taking a biochemistry course, I was a biochemistry major in undergrad. You got to memorize all those amino acids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But trainers, actually, you're supposed to know the amino acids. But yeah, so you have the amino acids that made out of these basic elements. If you link together 1, 2, 3 aminos, you have a peptide. And peptides, they come in different sizes. So you could have 2 linked together, which is a dipeptide. You could have 3 tri. You could have more than that, like oligopeptides. And then, so peptide is anything from like 1 to 50 aminos linked together. And then past 50, that's considered like a protein. It's just a bigger molecule. So, like that's sort of the basics. Like, where peptides, it's just amino acids linked together. Now, peptides do a gazillion things in the body. I mean, like, it goes way beyond the scope of like a single podcast. You could go crazy on all different peptides. There's ribosomal peptides, there's neuroactive peptides, there's hormonal peptides, antimicrobial. Like they get used to everything. They're signaling molecules, they're building molecules, they're regulating molecules. They have different structures. They can be linear, just linked up in a row. They can be built into circles. You can tweak them, which that gets into like the GLP-1s, which we can get to. There's peptides that are used in skin research, GHKCU. Like your body's just made of them, literally, and they're being used for stuff all the time. So I mean, that's what they are fundamentally. The first peptide that actually like hit mainstream in regards to making a change in medicine, though, which is one I think probably everyone knows, is insulin. So like you go forward about 20 years, Frederick Banting and I think what's the guy's name, Charles Best. They basically discover insulin. Sort of accidentally, and insulin changes the whole game with diabetes, right? Like, before if you had diabetes, you're a type 1 diabetic, you just die. Then there's like the whole story, they give diabetic children diabetes. I mean, they give diabetic children insulin. The kids come back to life. It's like, oh my God, like we discovered something, life changing. So then you got insulin. You go forward time again. Next one discovered, I think it was oxytocin. That was like in the 1950s. Oxytocin gets discovered. What does that do? It's a brain peptide. Oxytocin is known as the bonding hormone, bonding molecule. It makes you feel attached to your children or your loved one or whoever. So like this research has been done for years and years. It's the general public obviously doesn't know these things, but it's not like peptides are this novel discovery that we found out about 5 years ago, right? It's been about a century at this point, more than that. As of today, there's around, I think, like at least I think 80, 100 plus different peptide drugs on the market. Like they're used in lots and lots of things. But the thing that changed the game, obviously, that made people aware of this was the GLP-1s, the glucagon-like peptides, which Ozempic came out. I think what was it, like 6 years ago now? 7 years ago? It got
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like I've only been hearing a lot about it over the last 2 or 3, though.
Yeah, well, the reason for that was Ozempic. So, I'll talk about the GLP-1s a little bit.
Okay, so just so you know, it was approved for medical use in the U.S. I just looked it up in 2017, so you're correct. Mm-hmm. And then in 2023, it was the 19th most prescribed medication in the United States with 25 million prescriptions. So I think I'm correct that it really hit the public radar after the pandemic, but you are correct that it was approved earlier.
Yeah, well, the reason why I knew about it before it ever got popular. So the bros, like the bro spear and biohacker spear and people doing, gray zone things, like those all kind of intersect with each other. I heard about in 2016 because guys were using it off market for appetite suppression, like dieting for bodybuilding competitions. And it was known as this really powerful appetite suppressant. And then when it got released, though, like when it got approved, it was approved, I think, originally just for like diabetes treatment. And then now it's like more for weight loss, which is ended up being like sort of its bigger, bigger area of prescription.
Yeah.
But I mean, GLP-1s, they got kind of a crazy story. Like I'm not going to go through the entire story. Like again, it could be its own podcast. But it was sort of it was a team of researchers, unconnected, like in the 1980s, that started studying sort of this like gut signaling in the stomach. Since obviously food goes into the stomach, it gets digested, like things are going on, right? The hormonal cascade of the body is super complex. Like, what happens when we eat food, and like what causes insulin to go up? What causes ghrelin or leptin to be released? Like, what does that? And the GLP-1, the glucagon-like peptide, that was discovered as like signaling peptide in the stomach. But the original research into it, like it was discovered, it was realized like what it does, and it went from like rats to humans, and then it was there was a big breakthrough with Gila monster venom, contains like a version of like GLP-1, which is longer acting. But the original research into it found that it was very short lasting. And then again, I'm fast forwarding through a lot, but like you fast forward in time, and then it was realized through like more biochemical research that if you could take the GLP-1, this chain of peptides, adjust it a bit, you add on you change the tail of it so it gets broken down slower. You add on like a fat, and then if you do that, it lasts longer. And then that's basically what became Ozempic. So it's this very, very, very long lasting, what's called an incretin peptide technically, but this very, very long lasting gut peptide that just signals to your body, hey, you're full, which obviously makes you not want to eat. And that for obesity, for type 2 obese diabetics, can be life-changing. And then, now we have, the first drug approved of that was exenatide. This was over 20 years ago now. And then it was liraglutide, and then semaglutide, and then tirzepatide came out in 2022. And then retatrutide, or, the Reta, the retard, that's going to probably come out late next year.
Yeah.
And each iteration of this has gotten better. Like now it's went from GLP-1 to GLP-1 and GIP. Reta is going to be like a triple action with glucagon.
Yeah.
And there's ones in stage 1 trials right now. They're like quintuple action peptides. Well, if it hit 5 receptors. But, all these things were like, I think our mutual buddy Cremo on X, like he showed like through the data, after this all hit mainstream, hit the zeitgeist, since 2023, the obesity rate actually started to decline. Like I'm in whatever 35, 40 years, it's actually going down. People are healthier, which is wonderful, which is fantastic.
I will say, I will divulge that, like, after he started tweeting about it, a bunch of people messaged me and was like, have you seen this? And I was just like, bro, I'm the one that got him interested in this. So I was like, okay, yeah, I've seen it. Like, I was like telling him about it. Anyway, so it's like, this is like spread through our social networks. It's like in the Bay Area, like, who's your peptide person? And, you get through prescription, you get it through suppliers, whatever. Like people are using this. What do you say to people that are worried about the health side effects? Like, some of them have been quite vocal. Some of the people in the fitness influencer space, I'm not sure if they're necessarily broscience people. I think they're a little bit more traditional is the way I would say it. They have been warning that this isn't great and that, you need to use willpower and stuff like that. What do you say to people like that?
So I don't think any of those people have ever worked with the actual public. So there's bro science world, which is like, I would sort of deem that guys who are like in the bodybuilding, hardcore fitness sphere. Anabolics is a huge thing in that community, right? Like those guys tend to be pro like anything that's a drug that can make you bigger, ripper, harder, whatever. But there's also this sphere of like, I don't know if you could give it a name. It's sort of like the paleo natural, what probably started as a paleo natural living, holistic living, like return to nature people, where if you want to like, eat meat, eat raw meat, maybe, don't even cook your food, like live out in the sun, go barefoot, natural fibers, only cotton, avoid EMFs, like that's its own sphere, right, at this point. And it's pretty big. Those people are very anti anything pharmaceutical. But that group, like, and to their credit, like they're fun people, they tend to run young. It's like all 20, 30-year-olds. They've never actually worked with the public, majority of them. They're just sort of just into the cult, like the subculture. And I don't think they have any real extent scaled the problem. Like I've been to various meetups in Austin of like health enthusiasts who I would consider like are in that world. They're really into health for themselves. They don't work with people or patients or clients actually trying to get people healthy for the most part. If you've, like you said earlier, if you go out into the suburbs or you go into less developed parts of America and you see places that have 60, 70% obesity rate, those people are not going to start living barefoot and worry about EMFs and decide they need to replace everything in their house with wood because it's plastic. Like that's just a whole different universe they live in. Like they're overweight, they have health issues that cost a lot of money, both probably to the government and to themselves. Like, is there anything we could do to make these people less overweight? And this is the financial liability of society. What could we do for those people? So you have to think bigger. And the willpower part, like I just can't take that seriously at all. Like if you could just get people to do this, like anytime you start propositioning a statement where like you're trying to make like an is into an ought, if people just ought to do this, they just ought to do that. You're just an idiot. Like that's just retarded. Like again, there's no religion, there's nothing on earth that has ever been fundamentally been able to change in mass human behavior 100% at scale. If everyone just did this, then we solve the problem. It's just fucking magical hand waving. Okay, you do that then. Give us your magical guru words that change everyone's minds at once. You can't do it because it can't be done. Yeah.
So I want to ask you. So I was at I was at South by Southwest at a Maha event. And I'm friends with people in that extended sphere. Although I have some serious issues. I mean, if you follow me on social media, it's obvious. But like a lot of it isn't bad. But there was a panel and at South by Southwest, and I don't know who the speakers were, but I mean, they were talking about. I mean, okay, what I will tell you is like what really struck me is they were talking about banning GLP-1s because, it's pharmaceutical profiteering and all this stuff. And then the next hour, they were talking about the benefits of psychedelics. So, which I thought was okay. Like for me, it was like a weird juxtaposition, but obviously, like you are adjacent to, and I think you've defended some of the Maha stuff. And
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel like how the Maha works in with your whole bro science world?
So Maha is interesting. Like it's another larger subculture culture. Make America Healthy Again. A lot of it comes from, I would say, like the mom world. I don't know if I call it the mom sphere, like the mommy bloggers.
Yeah, I think they're called the Maha moms.
Yeah, Maha moms. Yeah, a lot of that started originally with like, sort of like vaccines, like vaccine research or, or lack of, let's say, double-blind testing of vaccines, like that whole question, vaccine injury. That's sort of where RFK Jr. got his really fame from, per se. It wasn't like the bro world; it was like the mom world. And then a lot of their initiatives are focused, I think, a lot on what I've seen, like a lot on food chain supplies, not selling out America's farmers or ranchers, better food labeling, cleaner food ingredients. So that's all good. Like on balance, I pretty much support all those things. But there's also this segment of like being anti-pharmaceutical, which I'm not anti-big pharma, nor am I anti-vaccine. Like pharmaceuticals, medical research have, I think, inarguably saved millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of lives. If you could spend any time in a hospital or a clinic and have someone come with an infection, they're required antibiotics. So like, hey, do antibiotics work? Yeah. Yeah. Does insulin work to treat? Yeah, insulin works. Like, does medical science do useful things? Yes. Like trying to position yourself as being anti-medicine is just retarded. But the fascination with psychedelics, though, I see that as like a sort of a development of like almost a new age, like neo hippies of like Mother Earth worship. That because psychedelics come from nature, right? That comes from like plant mother. They're like, well, it must be good for us. Okay, like psychedelic research, very interesting. Yeah, like I've had friends that have used psychedelics. I've used psychedelics. Psychedelics are highly dangerous. They can legitimately one-shot people's psyches, just give you total breaks from reality. And if you're going to use them, they need to be used in very controlled settings, for very specific purposes. I don't see the utility of psychedelics at scale as to what they are supposed to treat. Trauma, PTSD, battle trauma. Okay. But a lot of the psychedelic conversation is around just sort of people wanting to experiment and just have out-of-body experiences. And then to try to square that with being anti-GLP-1 medications, like GLP-1 medications were created to try to get people metabolically healthier. Psychedelics were, I guess, given to us by Plant Mother to go commune with a 5D Mesoamerican entity and hopefully not go crazy from it, right? Like,
yeah, it's weird. I mean, I think maybe some of the listeners can give their own perspective. I just think it's just very strange because, I mean, that stuff is dangerous. Like if people who've done ayahuasca, which is like the most extreme form, like it drives people insane. Whereas, the whole Maha pharmaceutical stuff, and that is actually like, percolated to parts of the far right, the right wing, the center right, whatever you want to say, mostly like the farther right, not the center right, that was a left-wing thing, though. It was a far left-wing thing. That's where like JFK or RFK Jr. and his, Maha moms come from. Ojai, California, Marin County, California, these type of people. And now, raw milk is, I would say that, the raw milk, raw meat, raw food, all of that stuff, it's a more aesthetically, visually oriented fitness influencer type cultural signal and marker. Like I don't see that as like a big thing for you, but it's become very, very popular in parts of, more of like the muscular right, I guess, maybe, back to nature, something very like strange and new in the American context, but maybe more relevant for European.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like I've commented on this before that one of the peculiarities of just how politics shift over time, right? Like what something starts out as, what it turns into can be completely different. If you go back 20, 30 years, like my grandmother, for example, like rest in peace, like she was like very leftist, like hippie in regards to her food politics. Even like when she was, my mom could always told me in stories like going back to like the 1960s, like she wanted what we now call like organic bread. She wanted natural bread, and she shopped at the health food store, and she hated TV dinners, and she didn't believe in the microwave, and she wanted everything to be as close to the earth as possible. And that was at one time considered a very like leftist position, right? Like the aesthetics of it. Now it's a right wing thing. It's shifted, dramatically. But then I mean, this gets into like the what would you call it? This like the not hypocrisy, but like this sort of like the like the logics of politics, where you have all these differing perspectives, none of which necessarily line up with each other. Like I don't think I mean, maybe they do. Like trying to be pro super raw nutrients live in the earth while also wanting to be like pro technologification and reach the stars. That's two very different places and aspirations. And maybe they can meet in some kind of middle, but like how do we even get there?
No, I totally. I do want to say one thing. I think I mentioned this before. In 2016, SNL did that sketch about the bubble, which is like, what if Hillary won? And one of the identifying aspects of being, a Brooklyn liberal was raw milk, which now, 9 years later has totally flipped. I think people would be shocked by it at the time, but it's 9 years. It's not even that long, right?
No, it's not. I mean, yeah, in a way, I think what gets called right wing now, and this is me being, political myself, which I am, but like I think what gets categorized as right wing now is it comes down oftentimes to just how stuff looks. Like if it's something that's seen as sort of like semi rebellious against like the generic progressive politics, and also allows you to like look hot, well, that's right wing. Yeah, if it's something that's ugly or like normie mainstream, well, that's left wing. Yeah, I mean, it's a very blunt definition, but that's how things tend to fall now into like, well, which side is it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, going beyond politics, going back to like, fitness, nutrition, and health. So you're getting into the fertility space. You have a company that you're running with your wife, Ferta, Ferta, and like the website is joinferta.com. And you're just getting it off the ground. And I mean, I think that's, we've talked about doing this conversation for a while. And I think, for you, the recent, I mean, you want to talk about this, my audience is actually quite interested in the fertility space. I posted stuff about in vitro and embryo selection and all these other things. We are now in a birth dearth. Fertility is crashing. Back when we were little, you're an elder millennial. I'm a younger Gen X. It was overpopulation that everyone was talking about, but now it's like the fertility crisis and all this stuff, and older couples that are trying to have kids. And you are now in the space as an entrepreneur, as trying to help people out. So why don't you talk about what your philosophy is, what you're trying to do, and what people can expect from you guys.
Oh yeah, good pivot. So yeah, so my actual like big like sort of legacy project right now. So it's Ferta. So to tell a story, and I'll go slower with this one. So I met my wife in 2018, and my wife is Preeti Casaretti on X. So my wife comes from like the big crypto, big tech. She has a very pedigreed background. Like she went to USC and worked at Goldman Sachs and worked at Anderson Horowitz and worked at Coinbase. And she like wrote one of the foremost papers on Ethereum. She's smartest one I ever met. I met my wife 2018, and this was quite a while ago. Like I knew like, okay, I want to marry her. I want to have kids. And she had been on birth control for a long time. She came off, and her menstrual cycle did not return. Like 4 months went by, 6 months. Okay. A year went by and still hadn't come back. And that's where like I got concerned. And so I was the one that told her to go off in the first place. And it's like, okay, something's wrong here. And then we shopped around for doctors for actually about 3 years, and we didn't get any real diagnosis. She got told she had PCOS, which she didn't have PCOS. We got told there was unexplained infertility, which is not real diagnosis, or we can't explain it. Okay, it's not helpful. We got told to do IVF, which I didn't want to do IVF. I wanted like real answers, like what's actually wrong, like how can we solve this? And not that I had extreme faith in medicine per se, but sort of like it broke me of any illusion I had of like medicine having sort of answers to complex health issues. I was under the naive belief that if medicine had anything figured out at all in regards to fundamental health, it would be fertility or reproductive health, right? Like, how do organs reproduce? We should have good answers for that. But as I found out, fertility medicine really did not. The preferences for IVF, which I'm not anti-IVF at all. Like IVF can be miraculous when it works, but it has a very high failure rate. It's about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 success rate. It's very expensive, and it didn't solve the fundamental problem of like why doesn't she have a menstrual cycle? Like, what's the issue? So in the course of trying to go through different doctors, I started just diving into the research. I'm like, okay, like what makes an organism like reproductively vital? Like what makes us able to have kids in the first place? Is it just being young? Like, okay, if it is being young, like why? What's different from being young versus being older? Like, it just go beyond the chronological. And what we realize is that fertility, like reproductive health, it's driven by arguably three primary factors. Yeah. Number one, you have your hormonal health, which is being in the hormonally healthy, robust state where you have a normal infradian cycle for women, or you have a normal cycle for a man who's reproduction. And that requires great metabolic health. So like your hormonal health, metabolic health, reproductive health, we're really all the same thing. Next, you have mitochondrial health. That's a very critical one. Your overall mitochondrial supply in your body starts to decline like in your late teens, early 20s. So, but reason why a younger person is more fertile than an older person, again, it's not the age exactly. It's they have more mitochondria, they have healthier mitochondria, they're more hormonally healthy, they're more metabolically healthy. Like that's what keeps an organism fertile. And then if you look at the research on older couples, like in their 30s, who do successfully conceive, like naturally, like what makes a woman more fertile, it goes back to the metabolic, hormonal, mitochondrial. And this is actually known in IVF. Like if some of the cutting edge stuff in fertility world is like trying to do, let's say, like for women who are basically infertile with like really poor egg health, they'll try to do mitochondrial transfers from like a healthier woman to like the less healthy woman in the literal egg. Which I mean, that's just like as a very good data point. Like again, like healthy mitochondria. So my wife's diagnosis specifically, she had what was called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which because she had not just been on birth control, but she had basically been like an over-exerciser for many years. Like she's super fit. She'd work out 3 hours a day, tons of cardio, she's pretty skinny. She was, technically underweight, had low body fat percentage, liked being really lean, but all that is not conducive to reproductive health for a woman. The ideal female body fat percentage for reproducing is around 22 to 28%. It might be higher than you think for some women. Like the whole sort of fit chick ideal of like being like the hot girl with abs, terrible for fertility. But my wife, when we finally got the diagnosis, this took 3.5 years to get a diagnosis, right? Like every year it's just lost time. Like you don't have infinite time to have kids. It's lost time. We finally got the diagnosis. So she was hypothalamic amenorrhea. She found a really good functional doctor in Michigan online. And this is the other problem with fertility and fertility world. Everything's scattered. Like there's no central place you go to. You have to hope that you have like the world's awesomest doctor who sets you on like the right path to getting your issues resolved, which, that was not our experience. But she got a diagnosis. She made the necessary changes, which ironically were just sort of like very dietary stress mitochondria driven. It was lower your oxidative stress, gain weight. You need to super nutrify since like you're actually depleted in a whole bunch of things based upon like functional reading your blood work. And then she got her menstrual cycle back and she got pregnant within 4 months and we had our first kid and we had our second kid and, we're going on from there to have some more.
Yeah.
But that whole experience, like it was, it's painful to go through, right? Like for any couple that's living, it's like, okay, you have to figure out like, okay, or we get told typically is like, try for a while, 6 months, maybe try for a year, and then we'll start doing some testing, but it moves at a slow pace. And then, maybe it's a husband, maybe it's the wife. A lot of men today, men don't realize this. 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 men today are functioning fertile and don't know it. Like there's also the whole issue of really low sperm count, which is a real epidemic that guys just don't know about until they find out they're the problem. And so, everything moves so slow and it's hard to get good help. So that's why we started Ferta. It's like, okay, if we were to make reproductive medicine go as fast as possible, where even before you start trying to have kids, you find out your actual state of reproductive health, like full deep dive investigation done of every possible thing that could be affecting it. Whether it's and that's full blood work, that's gut health, that's heavy metal testing. Like we do it all. Like we're going to look at everything, and then we'll try to get you on the right protocol, right treatment plan as quickly as humanly possible. So we started that company in January. Basically, we actually had our first pregnancy this past month, which is really cool. We've had a number of women, especially where we've gotten them menstrual cycles back. We also had the male patients where they found out they had low sperm count, like it's getting better. Because all these things are improvable. Like that's the other factor. All the stuff that gets done today in longevity medicine, or anti-aging medicine, like how can we live longer? How can we be healthier? How can we reverse our biological age? You can apply all that stuff for reproduction. Now that doesn't mean you're going to be having kids when you're 55, but you can in fact extend out your reproductive window to 40, 45. And if you get yourself metabolically fit, that's entirely possible. There's women that do it. There's women who have kids in their late 30s to 40s, and they're able to get pregnant. Like it's not, it's not, probability wise, it's not an impossible task, but it just requires the proper testing, it requires being proactive. And that's what Ferta is. That's the whole company story.
Yeah. I mean, my my last son was born. My wife at the time was 40. She had just turned. So I totally know it's doable. One thing that a lot of the younger listeners don't know is when you get to a certain age and you start to think about having kids, and it could go easy for you, it could go hard for you, but then you kind of get into a community of people that are talking about it, and it's tough. A lot of the people who've struggled, it's kind of awkward to talk about, I think, to people.
Yeah.
Because it gets them down and they don't know what to say because they can't do anything. So it's a very fraught topic, and that's why there's huge industries building around it, because people need to reach out and find someone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just one of those worlds. Like until we were in it, I didn't know that existed, right? Like you don't know about a problem until you're the one living it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in the course of just like those 3.5 years, like we met so many couples, or just people in our age bracket, right? Like early 30s, mid 30s, trying to have kids. And like the number of, ideally it's like, someone, they have sex one time, they get pregnant immediately. Like that's great. That's not the norm. Like the number of couples you'll talk to where it's like they've had multiple miscarriages. That's way more common than anyone realizes. Like the wife had a miscarriage, they had 2 miscarriages, they had 3 miscarriages. Or they try for like 2 years, something like that. Like nothing happens. The husband finally gets tested. It's like, he finds out he's got really low sperm count, which is, as a man, just like a gut punch, right? Like you find out that you're impotent. You don't want to share that with anybody.
Yeah.
Like and naturally, it's just like, wow, I feel really demasculinized.
Yeah.
It's one of those communities where, and then you're talking to other people who also have very depressing stories. It's like, what works for you? Like, what are you doing? What do we do about this?
Yeah.
Like I said, there's no central hub. There's no primary fertility authority. There's no textbook on how to treat infertility. You just have to figure things out for yourself. And you become very dependent upon your provider, your PCP, or hopefully you go to a really good OBGYN. But there's a huge lack of support. Like one of the people we have on staff for our patients, we have essentially we have a therapist. We have like a mind-body therapist on staff. Since there's also this big emotional component to it, because then, the normal enthusiasm you have for sex, well, that changes, right? Because now it's like, we normally have sex to have sex. Sex feels good. Now you're having sex. It's like, I want a baby to happen. Did it happen this month? Oh, it didn't happen this month. What about next month? What about the month after? We've been trying for 2 years, still hasn't happened. Who's the problem here? And marriages, as well. Like you also will see those stories.
Well, so a question I have for you as we're closing out. So you started this company for obviously there's a demand. I mean, we don't need to explore this. I think everyone out there, maybe above 30, they'll know that there's demand because they know enough people. What would you say? Like, what is it that doctors are not doing? Like, why do you need to start a company like this? Because this seems like, as you said, medicine should be handling this.
Yeah. So the problem that fertility gets approached, like this is where I think I would say Ferta is very unique. We approach reproductive health as a vital sign of good metabolic hormonal mitochondrial health. Like we call it like the metabolic theory of fertility. If you are an overall metabolically healthy individual, and that's a very comprehensive definition, then you should be able to conceive naturally. Currently though, like medicine does not approach it that way. Reproduction is approached much more mechanically, where it's a problem with the testicles. It's a problem with your uterus. And that makes the process fairly slow. So the way it gets done in medicine, where you get told to wait 6-12 months, and then we'll test each of you not at the same time, and then the recommendations typically just skew towards like the IVF. IVF is essentially sort of like a brute force pregnancy, where you give the woman enough hormones to induce would be a pregnancy state, and then you have to also go through the implantation process or the extraction process, the fertilization process, and then it gets implanted. The way medicine approaches is very mechanical, where we approach it metabolically. My honest to God belief is that probably 89% infertility cases, certainly unexplained infertility, it's just metabolic, mitochondrial in nature. Because if you get deep dive into the data and research on like reproductively healthy women and men, or people who struggle with infertility, it all skews metabolic. If you have insulin resistance, if you are overweight, if you have accelerated aging, if you have oxidative stress, if you have subclinical thyroid or subclinical hormones, all that stuff affects reproductive health. And these are all things that are improvable, but doctors are not trained in that. Like doctors are not trained in health enhancement and metabolic medicine typically. That's a whole new really field that's only arisen in the last 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think, one thing I would say with medicine and with doctors is, it's just the reactivity as opposed to the proactivity, I mean, if they don't see the problem, it's not their problem to deal with because, it's not a problem when you're not trying to have children. If you're a woman with abs, you're excited, you're fit, you're healthy, doctor's not going to say anything about that.
No.
Whereas like, with what you're talking about, it's kind of like, the word holistic is kind of a buzzword, but you just take into account the whole health and what your goals are and like what the trajectory in the next couple of years are. And you just update based on that. But, with a doctor, you're lucky to get a half an hour with them. I mean, they're going through their checklist and just like making a quick judgment based on that. It's just like, it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, like doctors are not health enhancement specialists. Like, I mean, I realized this when I was training clients in person, I would see people oftentimes like 3 hours a week, which I mean, that was more than they'd probably ever seen their doctor in 3 years. Like I see them in for an hour at a time. The way medicine operates today, it's designed to treat acute problems, very good at critical care. But medical education is not oriented towards enhancing the vitality of like the overall living system. I mean, even the way I just phrased it, like the whole concept of vitalism, of vital energy, of like, how do you make a thriving organism? That's a philosophical question that gets argued about in medicine to this day. Like, is that what a doctor is for? Is the practice of a doctor meant to make you healthier, or is it just to keep from being diseased? It's just disease focused. And this is not a knock on physicians. So it's not to say that doctors are shit and medicine sucks, but just the orientation is disease focused. I think any physician would admit that. It has nothing to do with health enhancement. Because then health enhancement gets into like, well, how do you define function? What's the difference between a high level function and a low level function? What's the difference between optimal versus suboptimal? Like those questions don't have clear answers really in any specialty. And the doctors that go pursue that direction, they oftentimes get vilified or sort of ostracized for like not doing real medicine because they're not disease focused that way. But for something like reproductive health, like you have to get what we do is not alternative. Like you have to take a more broad, what I consider like a systems integrated approach. If we know for a fact that everything in an organism is engineered, designed, evolved to make sure that organism reproduces, right? Like that's I think a basic principle of biology. Why do living things exist and have sex? To reproduce. Okay, so I think we can accept on premise that everything in your body, metabolically speaking, is designed to somehow, directly and indirectly, support reproduction. Fair? I think that's fair. Okay, so if that's true, if we can say that's true, why would we not look at the system in its entirety? So you can call that holistic, you can call it integrated, you can call that root cause approach, like call whatever you want. But like that's our approach to medicine. And the doctors that we have on staff, we have a functional medicine specialist, and OBGYN and endocrinologists, like that's their orientation towards how they treat our patients.
Yeah. 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 All right. So I guess I think we hit most of the topics here. I mean, obviously there's a lot to talk about. And I really do invite everyone to check out Alex's stuff on Twitter. A lot of resources there, a lot of, just informative stuff that I think can, change some people's lives. I mean, like that's a cliche thing to say, but it's totally true. I mean, it's like science driven. And also, like, you did emphasize outcomes. Like, I think like it is really outcomes. And, I've been in, I've witnessed you talking to people about, just giving people advice, and like you're very, very, very customized it to the different people. I think one of the problems with a lot of fitness influencers and modern medicine is a one size fits all aspect. And like you definitely do not do that. I think that's the real value that you add a lot of the time in terms of, you're looking at the person, you're taking the information in, and you're tailoring something that will, help optimize their fitness, and everyone's different, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to meet people where they're at. There was a book I read years ago about like biochemical individuality, where human beings, whether it's obviously genetics plays a huge role, genetics, ethnicity, just and even within that there's variation. Everyone is unique, and then also you have your overall health needs, your state of need, your state of awareness. There's no one size fits all solution. You always have to meet people where they're at. You have to do like do whatever you can to get like the most reliable outcome possible, whether that's minimum or maximum, and then you just take it from there. Yeah, and lots of things can work.
Well, I think maybe we'll do a follow up at some point, maybe next year. See how Ferta is going. See how many kids are in the pipeline there. But it was great talking to you, and I will see you around, literally, and also on the internet. It was great. It was great talking to you, Alex. It's been a long time in coming, and I hope the people listening out there get a lot out of this. This is not just like, I talk about some things like ancient DNA and stuff that's just cool and fun and interesting. But, as people get older, you got to start focusing on your health. You got to start focusing on your metabolic health. And I think you have a lot of insights out there that will make a difference. So really appreciate you coming on, man.
I appreciate that. It's good to talk to you.
All right.
This podcast for kids. This is my favorite part.